helping you with Acorn and RISC OS computing.
Okay, well, firstly, good to see so many of you here. Thank you all for taking the time to come and listen tonight. Really appreciate it. Yeah, thanks for coming. Tonight's going to be a bit different to some of my usual talks where I've been talking about RISC OS development's latest things or RComp's latest products. There will be a bit of RComp plugging inevitably, but what I'm going to be looking at tonight is really a sort of complement to Mark Stevens' previous talk about RISC OS and Macs, and this time RISC OS and Windows, and how I use a combination of RISC OS and Windows machines here at RComp to do what I do day in, day out in my computing life. So before I sort of plow into the practicalities of all of this, I thought I'd give a little bit of an overview of the computer equipment that I actually run and why I do so. And that will give you some idea of, what the kind of things that I'm doing and why I'm doing them. My main machine, which may make people laugh, is now, I think, almost 17 years old. And it's a RISC-Cube that I built with a very first generation Intel Core processor. It's a dual core chip. And if you look up on Wikipedia, when Intel launched the very first Core i3, Core i5 CPU, then that's how old it is. And believe it or not, it can still cut the mustard and get the job done. It's not the greatest computer in the world, but with 8 gig of RAM and a solid state disk, it does what I need in order to do my work. Typically, I have several dozen web browser pages open on the Windows side and RISC OS running with a large number of apps and email. All my email is done on RISC OS in Messenger Pro, as is all of my my work in documents and publicity materials, correspondence, accounts in Profit, and so on and so forth. So all my day-to-day is done in RISC OS. But for me, having a dual operating system machine like that is more practical as a single operating machine to work on. I like it because it means I only have to have one machine to back up. And I like the practicality of being able to switch backwards and forwards into Windows if I need to do something with Windows, particularly web browsing. At least 2 or 3 hours of every day is spent doing web research. So having easy access to modern web browsing is extremely useful. And whilst Iris does potentially solve that for a native ARM machine, as I say, this is a solution that's worked for me for knocking on for 17 years. It also goes to show that you don't need state-of-the-art hardware in order to be able to do productive things with computers. It's very easy to get lulled into the sort of Microsoft speech of, a machine more than 3 or 4 years old is obsolete. You can't run Windows 11 on anything earlier than, I think it's an 8th gen i5. But the reality is that an older computer is still perfectly functional for the vast majority of things that you need to do. I wouldn't want to edit video on that machine, but beyond that, it does everything that I ask of it. In terms of native machines, I run an ARMX6, which is usually kept with its lid off so that I can plug drives and SD cards and things into it, which I use for all the building of new computers that I do, and a Pinebook Pro for sort of mobile and testing work. So if I'm testing Iris or something, although the ARMX6 does a lot of that too, the actual sort of release builds of Iris are all done on the ARMX6. And finally, I integrate a gaming PC into the mix, which again is still quite old. It's a 7th gen processor, so predates Microsoft's cutoff for Windows 11. But again, handles almost everything I want to throw at it for entertainment purposes, and that's the machine I'm talking to you today on. For demonstrating tonight, I've got the Pinebook Pro as a pure RISC OS machine, and I've set up one of our little sidekick computers as a Windows box. This is a nominally low performance machine, but still eminently capable. I think you'll be surprised at just how capable. And I'll show you the size of it. This is Sidekick. If I put my hand over the top of it, you can see it's sort of basically the size of my hand. That little beast has got 4 USB 3 ports, 3 on the side, 1 on the back. It has twin HDMI and a network port. There's built-in Wi-Fi, and even in this tiny space, you can actually have 2 drives. There's a built-in storage drive on the motherboard and space for an NVMe M.2 drive in there as well. So in theory, you can have a main drive and a backup drive if you were using this as a little server. What I forgot to mention in terms of the hardware is I also use a network attached storage drive as a transfer medium between all of the machines, but we'll come to that when I start talking about networking them all together later. If you find the little Sidekick machine to be just too dinky for yourself, here's a very slightly larger one that we do. This one packs an i3 and i5 processor. Again, similar number of USB 3 ports. It's also got a USB-C, twin HDMI 4K, gigabit Ethernet, Wi-Fi. As I say, full fat i3, i5 processor. And that has room for both an M.2 NVMe main drive and also a 2.5-inch hard drive or SSD as a secondary drive. So in that, it would be totally realistic to have, say, a terabyte main drive, which you could use as a main storage drive, an operating system drive, and a backup 2 terabyte drive to store regular backups of your data. So, you know, if you're not taken by the idea of a NAS, then a system like this, as you can see, you know, it's a little bit thicker, but still, if I put my hand against it, you know, extremely small. Both of these come with kits that allow you to mount them on the back of a monitor as well. So you don't even need to use any desk space for this kind of stuff. Both are affordably priced. The Sidekicks, I think, start sort of in the 200s, and the larger one would be in the 300s, but it's not bank-breaking stuff. And the idea is that if any of the sort of stuff I demonstrate tonight is appealing to you and you don't have a sort of off-the-shelf Windows machine that you use regularly, then it's quite possible to have something like this that is basically completely unobtrusive, providing you with additional facilities to open up your computing options. But I will put those down for a second. To access the various machines, I will be connecting via a VNC session, and I will also show you how we can use VNC in our day-to-day usage of RISC OS and Windows machines together. So, for example, today I'm using Zoom on my entertainment PC, but I will be connecting to the Pinebook Pro via a VNC session to allow us to demonstrate the native ARM machine over a Windows-based Zoom connection. So, without further ado, final bit of prep is that I'm going to cover both virtual Acorn and real hardware solutions. For the examples where I'm using virtual Acorn, you could just as easily use RPCMU. However, for me, I have a preference for virtual Acorn. I find it slightly faster, and with the ability to run RISC OS 4.39 out of the box, I get more features than I would get out of using RPCMU. That's simply because of the number of additional bells and whistles that exist in 4.39. I choose that because I run a mixture of 26 and 32-bit applications, so running RISC OS 5 would not be a practical solution for me because I want to be able to run both the 26-bit and the 32-bit apps on the same machine at the same time without having to resort to things like Emulator. So 4.39 RISC OS Adjust works for me. I can use the scroll wheel, I can start full screen, and I just find it to be a convenient and positive experience. I have that on the 17-year-old work machine connected to a ultra-wide 3440/1440 resolution display, and believe it or not, Virtual Acorn handles that with aplomb. So that sort of gives you the background. So I'm going to start with the Sidekick and look at how we can network that into the day-to-day operations of our computing. This particular Sidekick that I'm going to show is a Windows 11 one, and I set it up for the first time yesterday. I should stress that, as you can tell from the descriptions of the computers that I run, I don't normally use Windows 11. Most of the machines that we run here are Windows 7 or Windows 10. Most of the production machines that we sell tend to be still Windows 10 because that tends to be people's preference. But Windows 11 is becoming a necessary evil. So I thought, for the purposes of demonstration and exploration, if we brought up Windows 11 as the test machine with the Sidekick, it would give us an interesting insight into whether the techniques that we've relied on in the past for connecting to RISC OS and Windows together still applied with Microsoft's latest and no comment greatest operating system still apply. And do we need to do anything different with Windows 11 than we did before? Surprisingly, the answer is not a lot different. That came as a pleasant surprise and something of a reassurance. So what I'm going to do now is connect to the Sidekick via a VNC session. So I am going to bring up my VNC window for the Sidekick and then tell it to share. There's a lot of windows open. That's a precise point. There we are. That's the one I want to do. Let's share that. The program, the VNC server that I use on Windows hides the background, so that's the reason why we have a black display background on here. So first things first, let's go over what we need to do a remote sharing via VNC on a Windows machine. Because if you want to access your PC over a network from a RISC OS machine or from another PC, then you may well want to connect via a VNC session. To do that, we open our browser and we go to www.typevnc.com. There are a variety of VNC servers available. I find Type VNC to be extremely convenient and quite performant. All we have to do is click on Get Your Free Copy of Type VNC and then download the installer for 64-bit Windows, or if you've got an old system, it might be 32-bit Windows. I would imagine that 9/10 of all the machines available these days would be 64-bit, but there will still be some 32-bit systems if you have less than 4 gig of RAM. Well, 4 gig or less of RAM. So download the appropriate version. If you're not sure, if you right-click, this varies for different versions of Windows. If you right-click on the Windows logo down at the bottom and go to System, we can scroll down here and we can see that I would have expected there to be something here to say it's 64-bit version. Yes, system type 64-bit operating system, x64 based processor. As I said, this is a fairly low spec machine. It's a Celeron processor with which is a quad core processor running between 2 gigahertz and 3 gigahertz in performance. Whilst the Celeron is normally something that people would turn their nose up at, you've seen the tiny form factor that the machine is in, and as you'll see, the performance is quite amazing for the small size. And remember that if we're using this as a network device, we're not interested in playing the latest video games on it. What we want is decent performance for common applications and the ability to browse the web, watch video, etc. through it. And this little processor will do that just fine. Once we've downloaded our copy of Type VNC, we simply go to our Downloads folder and run the setup program. I simply accepted all of the default values, and when it prompted me for a password, I simply typed in a password that's nice and simple. I typically use very short, simple passwords for my VNC sessions because I'm not offering these sessions outside of my home network. So, I mean, some people would say, do I even need a password? But I think it makes some of the VNC clients get a bit upset if you don't put a password in. So just putting a simple password in to keep that happy. And then once we've done, we click Finish. And you will see Type VNC appears down in the bottom right corner. When you're connected to it, it changes color, and it can be useful to make sure it appears so you can see that it's running. So one of the things that is always worth doing is going to the taskbar settings on Windows and just making sure that the common things that you use are visible. If we go to the system tray icons here, and go to other system tray icons, you will see that I've enabled the UniPrint and the Type VNC things, which are sort of server things that I want to see on the taskbar. I'm not too fussed about OneDrive. I'm not too fussed about Bluetooth. And I'm certainly not too fussed about Microsoft Teams. Since I make significant use of the built-in Windows antivirus, I also like to see that on the bar just in case it changes its status on me and gives me a warning. With that, you should be ready to connect to your Windows PC. One thing is to make sure that you have a sensible network address assigned. By default, Windows will normally assign its network via DHCP, which means you'll get a different network address every time. That can be very inconvenient when you're connecting to it via VNC or indeed any other services. So one of the earliest things I would strongly recommend you do is to set a fixed network address. Now, because of pressure to use DHCP, I actually strongly recommend doing this at your router end. This will probably put the fear of God up some people, and I apologize in advance if you do. You may well be able to set it manually in other ways if it does, but if possible, assigning the addresses via the router means that the computers will get the same network address every single time. I use a Draytech Vigor router, but other manufacturers' routers offer the same functionality in different ways. It can be difficult to get into some suppliers. One of the reasons I don't recommend things like Sky Broadband connections is because they do not want you to touch their routers, and they demand users use DHCP, but they don't provide you with the login details to actually configure your router or any of your usernames and passwords. So it's a bit of a nightmare in those situations. But wherever possible, going into your router, and you'll find that in the LAN or DHCP settings, you will find the ability to bind the IP address to what we call a MAC address, which is the address of the networking. Typically, this is as simple as just finding your computer in the list of networks that are available. If I go into my Draytech, if I go to LAN, there is an option that says bind IP address to MAC. And here, all I have to do is double click on an entry in the list and it will add it to the bound addresses. And that way I will always get the same reserved network address. In some cases, it's called reserving a network address. In some cases, it's force an IP address. But doing it that way means that I can plug and unplug the machines. And when I do so, I always get the same network address assigned. It also avoids any network conflicts because the router is well aware of which addresses have been assigned via DHCP and won't reallocate them. And that avoids an accidental overwriting of a fixed IP with a DHCP address. If you do decide to use static addressing rather than doing it via the DHCP method that I've been showing, then I would strongly recommend that you limit the range of addresses that you're routed DHCPs to. So in other words, make the DHCP pool maybe 64 or 128 addresses, and then use addresses outside of that range for your statically or fixed assigned addresses. So in other words, if your router is 192.168.1.1, you might use a DHCP pool of 192.168.1.5 through to 192.168.128, and then make all of your static addresses higher than 128 to avoid a conflict. So with that, we should then be able to know what our IP address is for the purposes of connecting, and then we can connect to our computer via VNC. which we will demonstrate in a minute when we switch over to the Pinebook Pro. The other thing that we do in terms of preparation with Windows 11 or indeed 10 or probably earlier ones too, I strongly recommend that you bring up the Start menu and you pin the classic control panel. You do that by simply typing Control Panel and right-clicking the results and go Pin to Start. That way you can get into the classic control panel, which is often the best way to mess around with a lot of the settings. In this case, we start with the Uninstall a Program option, turn Windows features on or off, and we go down to the SMB 1.0 CF file sharing support option. I should say that this is Windows 10 Pro, Windows 11 Pro. In general, I would strongly recommend users use Windows, the Pro versions of Windows. That tends to be what we supply with our machines. There is not a huge cost involved in Windows 10 or 11 Pro. As you can see, the cheapest Sidekick machines coming with Windows 11 Professional. So it is strongly recommended that people do so. That being said, these options are available in the home version, and in theory, there is no reason you shouldn't be able to do all of this with Windows, the home version either. The main differences between home and pro tend to be in the more corporate networking facilities, which shouldn't affect what we're doing here. But in the interest of clarity and openness, I am using Pro here because that's what essentially came pre-installed with the Sidekick base unit. As you can see, I've turned off the automatic removal facility and I've turned on the CF, the server capability. I've left the client facilities turned off because I am not intending with this machine to connect to a SMB v1 server. If you did want to run SMB serve on your RISC OS machine, then you could leave that turned on. But honestly, I find it more, I find SMB serve to be buggy and problematic. So I tend not to use that. And I tend to just transfer files in both directions through the server this way or through the NAS. The bottom line is if your RISC OS machine and your Windows machine can both see the same folder, then you can transfer files backwards and forwards by dragging and dropping the files. So it doesn't really matter. You don't necessarily need to set up things in both directions. And if all else fails, as I say, a NAS is the solution. Although some versions of NASes are starting to drop SMB1 support, which can make life tricky. I tend to recommend QNAPs for NASes because I found those to be, I've had good success with those. But as I say, there's always the potential issue that a future firmware update may make life difficult. But at least you can with roll back firmwares more easily than you can roll back versions of Windows if necessary. Although from a security perspective, always keep up to date if you can. I don't mess with SMB Direct. This is not really relevant to what we're doing. So once I've got these options set right, I click OK and let it sort itself out. A reboot may well be required after you've done that. The next thing we need to do, again through the control panels, is to go to the network and internet settings. And then we need to go to the network and sharing center. Then finally to the advanced sharing settings. And Windows 10, I think you would still stay in the old control panels area. Certainly with Windows 7 you would. In Windows 11 it's now replaced it with one of these sort of new style setting screens for this. I have network discovery turned on. That allows Windows to see other machines on the network, and file and printer sharing turned on fairly obviously. And then we have public networks and all networks. You'll notice upstairs here it says private network current profile. Strongly recommend that you make sure that that is the case, that it is currently set to a private network. It may ask you, if not, when you turn the network discovery on and do say private network. Public networks are for situations where you're in a sort of coffee shop or something. If you're at home with your other RISC OS machines, you want it to be set to a private network profile, which opens things up a little bit more so that we can connect to the system more easily. Then we pull down the all networks. I turn on public folder sharing. I turn on 40 or 56-bit file sharing rather than 128-bit, and I turn off password protected sharing. With password protected sharing, I know that you don't require a user on the PC. I'm sure this will set some people's alarm bells off from a security perspective, but I would stress that we are behind a fairly decent firewall on our home network. And I would not recommend opening these ports to the outside world, certainly not in this configuration, but then they wouldn't be open to the outside world anyway. Having it set like this provides straightforward access through Landman 98 or Omni Client. And the next thing I'm going to do is show how we can create a shared folder on this machine that we can make available to our other RISC OS machines. The first thing to say is that you cannot sensibly share the root directory of drive C, or indeed most root directory drives. There are ways and means, but it's an exercise in pain, especially with the permissions. So you're always better off sharing a folder on a drive rather than attempting to try and share the drive as a whole. You will run into a lot of unpleasant hurdles if you try to share an entire drive directly from its root directory. So what I'm going to do is create a new folder. And in honor of terminology that an old customer who's now deceased always insisted on using, I'm going to call this file swap. Whether you spell it with an A or an O, it depends on whether you're British or American spelling mode. But I've created that folder. And having done so, we now want to share it. Whilst I'm sure it's possible to share with spaces in names, I tend to do so without, because spaces tend to cause hassle when typing things in. So the first and biggest tip is, because permissions are a thing on Windows, it is quite important that you start with the simple sharing before moving on to the advanced sharing. If you try and think, oh, I just need to jump into the advanced sharing options to share the folder, I often find that permissions do not get set correctly and it causes problems. So start by clicking the share button. It first asks who we want to share things with. There is a magic word for having hassle-free networking, and I like hassle-free, and that is the word everyone. If we add that, you'll see that it's not a picture of two people rather than a picture of one person. That's because it's a group. In Windows parlance, and that group I'm going to give read-write permission to. So we should then be able to read and write files to our file swap. We then click share, and you saw a green bar going across. If you've got multiple things in that folder, then you will find that it takes quite a while to scan down the hierarchy, but it does set all the permissions how you want, and that's the important thing. It also sets a weird default location, which, I say weird, it will be almost the complete file path of what you're sharing. We'll come to this later because we can fix that in the advanced sharing. So I've shared that, and we'll click done. The other thing to note is that certain folders like Windows, program files, and potentially parts of users will be considered protected folders. So you may not be able to share the whole of those folders either, and you may need to share subfolders within it. So for example, in your user profile, you'll only be able to share your own user profile, for example, and you'll probably need to share the sort of documents and downloads and things individually rather than sharing your entire user profile. For that reason, it's generally a smart idea to keep your sort of shared folder outside of the normal user hierarchy, because that way it can be accessed by all users, and you don't need to worry about whether things are logged in to have rights and access to things. You may even wish to put that on a separate drive and keep your drive C sort of unshared, and use your sort of drive D for file sharing and file swapping by creating a folder on there. But for now, we'll do that. The other big tip is, if you create a folder like this, I strongly recommend that you add it to the quick links down the left-hand side, because these are used not just in the Windows filer, but also when you're saving and loading documents in applications. And that means you can save and load files directly into your file swap directly down the left-hand side of the thing. So if I right-click on that, I can click Pin to Quick Access. And now my file swap is on there down the left-hand side. If I load LibreOffice and go File, New, incidentally, side comment, you saw that LibreOffice is loading quite snappily despite it being nominally a low-spec CPU. And if we save as, you'll see that the file swap is now down the left-hand side, and we can just click there with one click to get in and out of the file swap. Similarly, if we're loading files, we can go File, Open, and again, there's our file swap to access our files. So having it pinned to the quick access is a sort of pro tip that will save a lot of head scratching and faffing around if you're trying to transfer files to and from between your computers. On a similar note, if you're running Virtual Acorn, which I have installed on here, I've just used the lowest cost Virtual Acorn, the £25 DL version. For those unfamiliar with Virtual RPC DL, it's a version that is available not on the usual Virtual Acorn site, but on the www.riscos.com page. And it's half the price of the normal VA, and has the added bonus that it doesn't have the unlock code requirement of the CD-based versions. So it's a download edition that you can just download and run on your computer without having the unique sort of locked to a specific machine type thing, which obviously makes it sort of similar in convenience to something like RPCMU. Of course, RPCMU is free. As I say, a lot of these techniques will apply just as much to RPCMU as to Virtual RPC. If you're using Virtual RPC, you want to go to Virtual Acorn, then your Virtual Acorn folder, and right-click the hard disk 4 and pin that to quick access. Again, same reasoning. That means that the hard disk that you use when you're in a virtual system will be available down the left-hand side for loading and saving when you're working in Windows. So, for example, if we jump back to LibreOffice again, and we want to save as, we can find our in our pinned items, we can find hard disk 4, and then we can save our document directly into the RISC OS file space, so that when we load Virtual Acorn up or RPCMU, you will find the files that you saved directly out of your Windows applications in your hard disk 4. We can also map through our file swap, and I will show that in a minute, because that's, if you are doing the file swap approach in the drive C, then it can be jolly handy in your virtual system to be able to access that directly with an icon on the icon bar. Going back to the sharing then, we now want to go to advanced sharing. We can see that this file is shared with a share name file swap. We can add another name. As I say, I don't particularly like spaces for this, so the share name, I'm just going to call it file swap. I'm not going to bother with a description. I'm going to leave the maximum allowed. And if I click permissions, I can see everybody. And I want to make sure that everybody has full control. And once I've done that, all being well, we will be able to access that from a RISC OS machine. I'm now going to stop sharing that very briefly and share a different window onto my Pinebook Pro. Zoom. Is the Zoom window gone? Sorry, Zoom has disappeared into a sea of windows. I'll share screen and Pinebook Pro. Share. Hopefully, you're all seeing my Pinebook Pro window. Yes. And now, if we go to Landman 98, if I type in, I think actually it's about to get confused. I think I'm just going to quit that and rerun Landman 98. Because I've seen other versions on the network. So if I create a new share, I didn't need to put a username and a password, and there we have the file swap opening first time successfully, as it did for the test folder that I made the other day, yesterday to test it. So I can then copy that file onto the file swap from this machine, and then if we stop sharing that screen, actually we'll do no, we can do some fun stuff from there. Let's go back to that window. This time I will load Avalanche, which is a VNC viewing program for RISC OS. Quick plug that a lot of these techniques that you'll see are included as standard with our RISC cubes or sidekicks or space cubes or RISC books or RISC cubes, and software will be included with things like Forte or Pinebook Pro or etc. But obviously you can download things yourself if you're not using one of our computers and do it yourself. I've tried to give you the techniques rather than just sort of smoke and mirrors, and just so that you can recreate this yourself rather than having to rely on buying computers from us. I hope that you understand the candor of giving you a little bit look behind the scenes a bit. So here I've used the hot list in Avalanche, manage hot list, to add the sidekick earlier. You can see I just put the IP address in and the password. Nothing elaborate. If I right-click the Avalanche icon, I get the hot list, and if I click Sidekick, then you can see that we have the Sidekick desktop. It looks a little bit weird because it's not being shown at 100% because it's got a 1080p desktop and the Pinebook Pro is 1080p. So to scale it down, it's showing it's 86%. So that's why it looks a little bit wonky. But if we now go to this PC and go to our file swap down the left-hand side, you can see that the data.xls file that we transferred across is now present there. Another little tip, as well as having it down the left-hand side for convenience, strongly recommend taking a file swap and placing it up near the shortcuts to the PC and the user folder on your desktop, and just for ease. That way we can easily open it directly from the desktop. You can also pin it to the start menu, which can be handy. Just right click on the icon and click pin to start. On Windows 11, that has a habit of putting things right at the end, so you may need to move it around a little bit. You can see I pinned the hard disk 4 because I find it convenient. Reason why it's convenient sometimes is if you have it pinned to the desktop, you don't necessarily have it available if it's behind other windows. So it can be convenient just to click the start button have direct access to the hard disk or what have you for your system. So with that, we can see that we have the ability to transfer files to and fro between RISC OS and Windows right up into the latest versions of Windows without any hassle. I touched on antivirus earlier. I would strongly recommend that if people have problems with networking and network protocols with RISC OS and Windows together, that they use the built-in Windows antivirus and supplement it with perhaps a free tool like Malwarebytes anti-malware, especially the free version, not the paid-for version. That tends to be a bit of a system hog, I find. But the free version is a nice cleanup tool for malware or viruses. If you suspect that you have a problem, you just run Malwarebytes over it and it will usually sort you out. That combination of the built-in Windows antivirus, which always scores remarkably well in group tests, usually sort of within sort of 1% of the absolute best on the market, which always seems to vary depending on which group test you read, but invariably better than some of the well-known ones that you tend to get bundled with computers and things. I won't name names, but I think you probably know the big names that I'm talking about, and they often score worse than the built-in Windows antivirus does. If you are using the Windows antivirus, it can be worth setting up some exclusions for things like Virtual Acorn or Uniprint. So if we go to the Windows Security and the account protection, no, sorry, I always struggle to find this thing. Virus and threat protection, and then virus and threat settings, manage settings. And then if we scroll down, go to exclusions. And here I've put in a selection of exclusions. I probably don't need all of them. I'm a bit of a belt and braces guy when it comes to this. Uniprint has a nasty habit of being incorrectly identified as a virus by applications and by antivirus applications. And sometimes they sandbox it, which can cause all sorts of problems. So I strongly recommend telling your antivirus program that Uniprint is not a virus. And similarly, for things like your hard disk 4, most antivirus programs will not understand a RISC OS hard disk or the files on a RISC OS hard disk. So rather than having something get stupidly misidentified, I tend to exclude these folders. And you could argue that leaves a door open for viruses to hide out in these places. And yes, that's true. But when I'm using my Virtual Acorn, I really don't want to have my files tampered with by Windows antivirus programs. I have seen an upside where sort of email sessions from Virtual Acorn will get scanned by AVG or something, and therefore, potentially virus emails get blocked by the Windows antivirus before they arrive in RISC OS, and that does work. But for me, the potential risk of having things messed up by a Windows antivirus program that doesn't know quite what it's dealing with potentially outweighs it. The other thing is that it reduces, RISC OS has lots of little files, which from a performance perspective means a lot of files to get antivirused, and that can have a performance overhead when using Virtual Acorn or RPCMU or something. So I prefer to have them excluded in the exclusions. Again, I'm mentioning this because sometimes people have problems with Uniprint because their antivirus program is doing funny things with it. And running in this manner that I'm showing can sort out problems. So basically, I'm just giving you what I regard to be the techniques that work for me. I'm saying some people will have deep intakes of breath at security aspects of what I'm doing, but because this is my home network, and the external connections are protected out, I am perhaps a little bit more, a little less restrictive than perhaps I should be into it at a certain point. in order to have a slightly more convenient life. Right. So that's looked at antivirus. We've looked at setting up network shares. We've looked at setting up a VNC session to Windows. But what if we want to set up a VNC session to RISC OS? So if we want to set it to RISC OS machine and VNC back to that so that we can control things in the desktop. Well, that's nice and straightforward too. Jeffrey Lee, the bringer of so many good things, has ported VNC. Oh, not ported. I think it's a ground up. I think it uses somebody else's base code, so it's probably a joint thing. But anyway, Jeffrey looked after it. Something called VNC Viewer. It's in most distributions of RISC OS. I believe it's in RISC OS Direct. It's on our machines in network server. If you go to network folder and then servers, you'll find VNC serve. It's also included as part of Pine Tools or PyTools, ROCC tools, the various tools programs that we offer. You can buy PyTools on Pling Store, or if you buy the other machines, you get the tools standard. And if we look under network for that, not only does it show us what our IP address is, which is always useful, all we have to do is tick on enable VNC remote access at startup. Or if we don't want it at startup, we can just literally start and stop it through the buttons here. We put in a password and click Start VNC Session. And that's how I'm doing this demonstration today. I simply tick the box, put in a password, Start VNC Server, and then I connect it to it through Windows. For viewing VNCs on Windows, I tend to like the real VNC client. The type VNC package that we installed earlier does include a VNC viewer. I just find real VNC's free viewer to be a little bit sexier. Shows nice previews of the devices that you've previously connected to. It's personal preference more than anything else, but that's the one I'm using to connect here. As I say, that's free. And all I do then is type in the network address of the machine. You saw that was, in the case of the Pinebook Pro, was 192.168.115. And it will prompt me for the password, and in I go. In this case, I don't actually have the real VNC viewer on it. But if I type, let's just search for viewer, we should have the type VNC viewer, remote host 192.168.1.15. Observant viewers will notice that we are on a RISC OS machine viewing a Windows machine via VNC, connecting back to the RISC OS machine that we are viewing. So we may have a degree of VNC inception. I click connect and the password. And there we go. I am going to kill that quite quickly because that is, I'm going to stop that on the VNC on the actual PC because that just gets a bit crazy. But hopefully I proved a point there that we can find our VNC back to the Sidekick. That's now gone. But you saw there how we can view a RISC OS machine over the network from a Windows machine. That can then be operated without any issues, as I am doing with the network right now with the Zoom session. Even things like scroll wheels usually work. So if I click on this window and scroll up and down with the scroll wheel, you can see that that's working just fine through VNC onto the RISC OS machine. Indeed, Richard Orpheus runs a lot of his RISC OS machines. He has quite a few RISC OS machines acting as servers and various things, and he accesses them all through his Mac through VNC. He's a Mac man, whereas I'm more of a Windows guy. So, you know, you can have a whole ream of hardware RISC OS machines and just access them all via VNC sessions. There was a performance issue issue is not quite the right word, element to it. I prefer to connect directly via a screen, keyboard and mouse myself. but the point is we can, and depending on what machine you're sitting at, it means that you can bring the RISC OS desktop into your Windows world or the Windows desktop into your RISC OS world. So what might we want to do with our VNC session to our Windows? Well, for example, we could use Chrome, and then we can go to the BBC website. And as you can see, our oh-so slow little box is making for a great browsing experience. The scrolling is always going to be a bit of an issue because you're seeing it effectively 3 layers removed. We're going through VNC to VNC to Zoom across the internet to your home machine. So I have no idea how that will look, but the point is we can do that directly in our RISC OS desktop. If we wanted to have the sort of almost full screen view experience, we could either press F11 on the Windows thing, at which point we can have a full screen view, or I tend to prefer to take the Windows taskbar and this is where Windows 11 takes some getting used to. Drop that down, and then I like to tick the automatically hide the taskbar. That will then give me the full screen display. I can still get the taskbar up by moving my pointer to the bottom of the screen, but then I can run the Windows applications full screen, and it's pretty much like having a native version of Chrome in the desktop. Similarly with something like LibreOffice. And then work on a document in LibreOffice in a window on our RISC OS desktop. If you're using a virtual system, then obviously this sort of VNCing is not really necessary because you can just switch backwards and forwards. But I know that some of our viewers will be using native ARM processors, which is why I'm trying to mix together a little bit of the things that we can do with native ARM machines versus the way we would tackle the same problems with virtual systems. On a virtual system, we would just press Alt-Return and run the LibreOffice natively on the virtual system, on the host system, or on the web browser. We can also, for example, do some copy and paste. Again, this can be done from the host to the virtual acorn or the host to our VNC. If we bring up something like Edit, the clipboard support, we can paste. Did I press Control-C? And now it's letting me down. This was working earlier. I need to use Uniprint. One of the advantages of our Uniprint technology is that we can also do clipboard sharing with that, but I haven't enabled it for this session. So that's not likely to be the problem. Okay, so I don't know what went wrong there. When I tried this earlier, when I did a bit of a run through, well, actually I did it out of Chrome, but I was able to copy and paste directly from my Chrome session Oh, it's just letting me down. Okay, so I don't know why that's not working. I was able to do that earlier quite happily. So I will move on from that and we'll try it some other ways in due course. Since I've moved briefly onto Uniprint, again, Uniprint is a key tool in the armory of anyone wanting to work with RISC OS and Windows. But actually, contrary to what you might think, it is also useful to anybody who wants to use RISC OS and Mac or Windows RISC OS and Linux. Even, would you believe, RISC OS and Raspberry Pi Linux. This is because thanks to a technology called Wine, you can run well-behaved Windows applications on other operating systems. And if you follow a tutorial for installing Wine on a Raspberry Pi OS system, it is entirely possible to run Wine on a Raspberry Pi. Even though it's x86 code on an ARM processor, you can have it automatically translate the x86 code into ARM code and run, I have, at the Wakefield show, I was demonstrating Uniprint running on a Raspberry Pi. It picked up my Brother laser printer first time automatically without any setup, and I was able to Uniprint from RISC OS to Linux without any printer setup and get a printout from my RISC OS machine to the Brother printer without any additional configuration. But Uniprint isn't just about printing. Sure, we can click Uniprint and see the printers that I've got installed on the, that's the address of the Sidekick. But we also have something called Unilaunch, and we talked briefly about Uniclip. Unilaunch is incredibly helpful and provides a way of launching files from RISC OS to Windows for documents and files that RISC OS can't handle. And even when it can handle those files, it can be more convenient to do it via Uniprint to get either better rendering or to have the PC do something that we don't want to tie up our RISC OS machine doing. For example, I saw somebody set up a playlist file for music files as a file on his RISC OS machine that he could maintain with his RISC OS tools in, I think, MPLS. Is that right? I may have got the extension wrong, but that in that format, he stored it on his RISC OS machine, and all he had to do was drop it onto Uniprint or double-click on it. I think he got it set so he could just double-click on it, and then his PC would start acting as an MP3 jukebox, playing all of his music in various playlists. And he could do it directly sat in his RISC OS machine. So without having to actually turn around and mess with the PC, he could just double-click on a file on his RISC OS machine and have his music just start playing through the PC jukebox. Now, of course, you could do that entirely on RISC OS. No reason you couldn't. But he got a PC, he got it turned on. So he figured it might as well do something like playing music rather than making the RISC OS machine have to do it. More practically, you may wish to handle files that don't handle so well on RISC OS via this method. So, for example, I have a data.xls spreadsheet here, which I can drop on there, or I can actually double-click on it. So I'm going to double-click on it. And if we then connect our Sidekick, all being well, there we are. It had opened the data.xls spreadsheet directly from our native RISC OS machine. It had passed it across the network and opened it in the application. Let's say we wanted to take that and we want to put it back as a CSV file, where you could go to Export, and then we could select a CSV file format. Nope. Why has it gone to HTML? That's crazy. What's going on here? Is it file save as then? Where are we? Save as. Yeah, that looks more like it. So text CSV file, and we'll save it as data.csv. I'm going to select from our pinned folders down the left-hand side, I'm going to select our file swap. And I'm going to save that data.csv file into our file swap folder. I came up with a weird, slightly odd. That is the file swap file. If I now close the Avalanche window and refresh our file swap, you can see there's the CSV, and I can drag that to Fireworks and insert that data into Fireworks. And using that kind of methodology, we can extract information out of files, text and data out of files that we might otherwise have problems with, and bring it back to RISC OS. I will often use that technique to get information out of, Word or Excel files that I can't otherwise handle. Of course, RISC OS applications make a good fist. TechWriter, for example, will do a lot of the Word documents. And in all fairness to Fireworks, I believe this Excel file will actually, if I drag that to Fireworks, it should have a fair fist at loading that in. It did. So it could, in this instance, the Excel document could have been loaded. But if it had been more of a complex file with perhaps pivot charts or something like that in it, pivot tables even, in there, then we might have had some problems handling those on RISC OS, and that technique allows us to pass it through. Now, you may have noticed that I double-clicked on the XLS file and had it open on Windows. If we go to, is it choice? No, it's file, the file types button in Uniprint. We can specify certain file types that we want to have handled by Uniprint directly. These can be edited, or you can add new ones. AE6, I believe, is Microsoft Word. Basically, if you've got a RISC OS application that's intercepting the file types, then Uniprint won't take it. But if you have other types of file that are specified here, then Uniprint will take the file and pass it through automatically. I believe data and DOS files, it can do it automatically, but I'm not. Let me just see if I set that. It's a long time since I've tested this. I set that as a DOS file, and I double click on it. Yeah, Uniprint will automatically handle DOS file type files. So if you don't know what, you've just got a file with an extension, you don't know what to do with it, double click the, set the type to DOS, double click it, Uniprint will then pass it across and try and the PC will then interpret the extension accordingly. Similarly, I can launch URLs. I might type in a URL like www.rcomp.co.uk. We put back the sidekick. We've loaded the RComp website. And that means that tricky URLs that we can't handle through RISC OS can be passed over to Windows for viewing. If I pin that to the pin board for a second, for example, not only can this be done through the Uni launch application, but you could tick the launch all URLs to PC, although that's potentially a bit extreme. But some programs have native support for Uniprint, which makes this really quite elegant. So if we go into, I don't know, which machine did I set this up, the demo on? Help. I think I set this up on the on my virtual Acorn system to demonstrate. So this was probably not going to be as good a demo as it would have otherwise been. But basically, Messenger Pro has, I've not set this one up at all. Please forgive me. No, I have no idea what that's. This machine has not been set up. Ought to be working. It's the right use DIR. I think it's the fact that no such connection. I think it's seen it's trying to run something from the NAS. Yeah, it's seen something on the NAS on another connection beforehand when I was transferring stuff around. Let's just see if I connect to my NAS. Here, this is going to end in tears simply because system variable has got somewhat confused. Yeah, okay. Well, at least we're back up and running, even if we have a so here we have a URL in Messenger. I have no idea what this URL. It probably no longer exists because this is really old. I had got in my other demo a whole lot of useful modern links, but you'll see the principle. If we right-click the link rather than left-clicking it, left-click it will launch it with whatever RISC OS application is currently set as the default browser. But if we right-click it, we can launch it, we can copy it to the clipboard, or we can defer launch or launch via unit print. Deferred launching allows us to put them in the link in a file and then launch them, launch a series of URLs later. Perhaps we want to sort of mark a whole bunch of URLs that we want to look at while we're browsing our email, continue doing our email, and then launch them all together for when we go over back to our PC and see all of the URLs. That once, or we just click launch via unit print. URL has been launched. And if we now go to our Sidekick, you'll see that it's attempted to go to that URL. Now, of course, as I said, this was a 2011 link. It's no longer present, but I think you see the basic principle. As I say, in my other demo, I had sort of Amazon, Facebook, and stuff like that, which would have been a lot more practical. But the point is, if somebody sends you an email with a link in, you can right-click it and go launch via Uniprint, and it will appear on the Windows machine, and you can work on it. You can then copy and paste information backwards and forwards, assuming it's working. Perhaps if you've turned on the Uniprint clipboard sharing, then that might be the way to go. We go to Uniprint and we go to clipboard. Let's share the clipboard with the MacBook Pro. Then if we do open a URL, we go to our history where we had a Wikipedia page. Then you can try copy and pasting. C in that, and go to UniClip, clip window, and no, we're still. Something doesn't like me today. think I'm going to have to give up on that line of testing. I don't know what's going on today. So frustrating when literally 2 hours ago I was doing these demos and they were just working perfectly. So
you haven't enabled the clipboard there on 139. And on the Uniclip bit, it's grayed out.
Oh, I see. Well, yeah, that should be sharing it back the other way though. Which is why I'm slightly surprised. But thanks for the suggestion. I think I'm just going to pass on that for this second. You just have to, I'm afraid, take my word for it that things will work. I mean, Avalanche has its own clipboard support, which is what's really throwing me, because that was working without the need for Uniprint sharing earlier, and it's not doing now. So I don't know what's upset the apple cart. As I say, I tested it successfully. So, okay. So using Uniprint, we can, as I say, not only print to obviously almost any printer, but we can share files and clipboard elements with the other platform. We also have Unicom. This actually allows us to send DOS commands through to a Windows PC, so we can actually issue remote control commands of the remote machine. So in theory, I can open up a session and type -R and see the local commands on PC. How useful this is again debatable, but if you have files that you want to run remotely, you can type them in through this and have Uniprint execute remote commands onto your remote PC. So bottom line, Uniprint provides a lot of useful functionality. If you're running it on a virtual system, then all of this functionality is also available between the two sides of the computer. So particularly UniLaunch, UniClip, I can double click on a Excel file, and frequently do, and have that load into the Windows side. And then when I alt return back, it will be ready for me. Now I'm going to close out of the Pinebook Pro now for a second. And go, let's stop share. And now I'm going to switch over to my virtual Acorn system. Now, hopefully you can all see my virtual Acorn desktop now. This is not my main machine. This is just a V8 install that I use for testing things on my entertainment box. It's the DL system. Side comment about virtual Acorn. One thing that some people aren't aware of is that whilst sort of CPU performance with virtual Acorn seems to have largely plateaued, after the sort of early huge leaps and gains that we saw, once they got to a point where virtual Acorn was essentially running out of the cache of the of the host CPU, then realistically only clock speed made any significant difference to its performance. And PC clock speeds have crept upwards, but not wildly so. What does make a difference is having a reasonably decent graphics card that the speed at which it can copy information in and out of video memory can make a huge difference to performance. So on my entertainment PC, I do notice that at high resolutions and high refresh rates, it is a little bit slicker than on my old work machine. Although, to be fair, you would expect a modern graphics card that's designed for gaming to be a wee bit faster than a 17-year-old integrated graphics. When I tested this with the Artworks Apple, it was basically instantaneous. Although when I did it earlier, either with Zoom running, it wasn't quite as nippy. but as you can probably see, that is very smooth and very rapid. It was, as I say, it was even more rapid without the extra layers going along. And so, it does help, even if you're not a gamer, to have a little bit of oomph in the graphics. Unfortunately, these days that means quite a big spend. So I quite understand that most people will just stick with the onboard graphics, which are perfectly adequate for general use. But it's worth saying that if you are after the best, there are advantages to at least a mid-range card. So when we're working in Virtual Acorn, again, we'll commonly use Uniprint. Again, we have Share Clipboard with Virtual Acorn. Here, even on RISC OS 4, if I go to Edit and highlight a bit of text from a forum post, copy, and open the clipboard. So if you have Uniprint running, let's try that again. Now this is ungrayed out, and I can drop that straight into Edit. The RISC OS 4 version of Edit, I don't think did global clipboard support. That's why I didn't paste it directly in. But Impression, for example, does. I do like my Impression. And if I press Control V, it goes at this text, and I can paste straight in from that that was a RISC OS open forum posting, straight in from the Windows web browser into the RISC OS application. Or I don't know, is there any chat available for this Zoom session? I'm struggling to get the windows up, so maybe that's a bad. No, I'm not going to attempt that. But basically, you'll have to take my word for it. I just highlighted some text and copy and pasted it into Impression. So this tends to be how I actually work. Is with 20, 30 browser tabs open on the Windows side, copying and pasting information backwards and forwards. I'll also often take an image, like a royalty-free image, or an image from one of our suppliers, right-click that image and in a Windows web browser and save it directly into the RISC OS hard disk 4. I showed you earlier how you can set up a link down the left-hand side so you can easily save into hard disk 4. Here you can see I've got a PB Pro JPEG that's been done in exactly that way. And what I will often do is load that down and then load it into Paint on RISC OS 4. RISC OS 4.39, the adjust version. I'm very fond of that edition of Paint. I like Paint a lot because I'm a pixel guy. Icons tend to be where I use graphics packages. So Paint's pixel level graphic design is what I naturally gravitate to for that kind of thing. And the version on Adjust has proper PNG support with transparency layers and the ability to convert between classic, mask, and full alpha. And it also has screenshot capability with PNG, JPEG, etc. So I find that very, very helpful. But what I can do is often bring in a JPEG or a PNG straight into Paint or into I find not installed on this because this is a test machine, but the David Pillings product formerly known as ImageMaster, again, very useful for dragging in the images and working on them, and then saving the results into Paint and working on them there, so that I can bring files from Windows World into RISC OS. Another tool that I find useful for this in a strange way is NetSurf, because quite often I can load certain image formats into NetSurf, for example, SVG, that are saved out of a Windows web browser, and then from there into a RISC OS application, either by doing a screenshot with Paint, or as an export out of NetSurf. I could probably use RISC these days for the same purposes, but because I'm running on a virtual system, NetSurf provides a useful tool for me to do that. Another technique that I will often use for more complex material is to take a screenshot with Windows, sometimes even of RISC OS applications. I recently had to take a screenshot of the Firework Pro startup banner, which comes on in a non-multitasking sort of way while the program loads. So I couldn't use Paint or anything to screen grab that. So I just did a Windows screenshot of the virtual Acorn window while it was loading, and then brought that back into RISC OS. You can grab the screen at any time with Windows, including of a virtual system, by pressing the print screen key. And then I can then open Windows Paint, paste the screenshot into that, and then save the file back into RISC OS and have a screen grab that can then be cut up and edited under RISC OS in whatever RISC OS programs I like. Obviously, for sort of cropping and editing images, you might choose Photodesk or something like that. So whatever you're most comfortable with. As I say, I also extensively use the ability to double-click a file and have that open in the equivalent Windows application, because then all I have to do is press Alt-Return to get and see the Windows application viewing the file. So, for example, some more complex PDFs, etc., can be launched in that manner. Again, we can use Avalanche and things. If I go to networking, Avalanche, to remotely access things even from virtual Acorn. The sidekick. Again, we can take a file like pbpro/jpeg. I mean, it obviously makes no sense to do a JPEG, but you could do that. And uni-launch that. And there's our Pinebook Pro loaded through a remote PC, even through virtual Acorn. Now, I'm not saying you need to use all of these techniques all the time, and I am jumping between networking and host machine virtual Acorn, and some of these techniques may seem complicated or a bit outlandish. You may want also to revisit the video that Wakefield put out afterwards to sort of go over some of the things that I've done. Close out. Actually, we do. Just thinking, I do have the Messenger example that I was intending to demo, so I will just quickly demo that. Bring up Avalanche again. So here I got some actual URLs of things that were vaguely interesting. So we can go launch via Uniprint. And then if we go to our VNC window, there we have, you can see Facebook opening directly from Messenger. And that can be really handy if you are sort of integrating your email, doing your email on RISC OS, and still wanting to integrate with the real world in terms of web browsing.
Is it just me that's still seeing the Pinebook Pro?
Oh, crumbs, is it? You should have been seeing a virtual Acorn window, is it?
I'm seeing Pinebook Pro.
No, I'm seeing your virtual Acorn.
That's weird.
Okay. It does on my system. It says there's a green box around my virtual acorn, which I'm going to say stop sharing, and I'm going to reshare that. I can see the chat now, so I will copy that into the clipboard as well, just to prove that it is a live demo. I'll start sharing the. Find it. So many windows. There we are. You should be seeing the virtual acorn window again.
Yep.
Is that now working, Bran?
It is for me now, yeah.
Okay. Anybody else want to just chime in and say yes?
Yep, it's fine.
Super.
Yeah.
So to just quickly do our demo, this should be the text that from the live chat. So somebody put that in live chat. It's very interesting to see all the different techniques that are available to integrate RISC OS and Windows together. So that's a live piece of text copied and pasted between RISC OS and Windows. As I say, that can be really helpful for just bringing things backwards and forwards into an email, for example. Messenger has full clipboard support. But if we were to do that and paste in, we can look up something on a like a URL or some information on a Windows website and paste that information into an email. So where was I? Okay, I'm slightly out of. Yeah, I was showing URL launching. Oh dear, I've lost me. Very much lost my place now. Okay. Right. Yeah, I don't know where I was. So I'm just going to close the VNC session. Apologies if I was in the middle of something interesting. Almost certainly not knowing me. And what I want to close with, I think, knowing that I haven't covered this bit and it is quite important, is to talk about file types and file extension mappings, because this is fairly critical to a lot of what we're doing, and I think it bears significant mention. Particularly as you may well want to make modifications to this yourself. In Virtual Acorn in particular, but this applies just as to a degree, a lot of this will also apply to native ARM machines. There are two things that govern file type to file extension mappings, which are the MIME-map file and the extensions.txt file for Virtual Acorn. I'm sure there's something similar for RPCMU. But basically, these are important because if you don't have, well, MIME-map's important when you're receiving files via email, etc., or sometimes with network stuff. The extensions TXT and Virtual Acorn is important for HostFS generally, which is the main hard disk stuff. And basically, these two, the MIME-map and the extensions.txt, are going to work in harmony, hopefully, to allow a sort of better experience in terms of file extensions and file types. The way HostFS under Virtual Acorn works is that any file, the file type by default is stuck on the end of the file with comma XXX. So a text file might be file, comma FFF, which is the file type for a text file. That's the same methodology used by Landman 98, incidentally, which can be extremely useful if you've shared such a folder with via Landman 98. A real ARM machine can see a HostFS mount and access the file types on it, which can be extremely useful for getting data out of things or into things, as a side comment. But what Virtual Acorn does is if a file doesn't have an extension, it will always append comma XXX so that it knows what to call it. So, for example, this file called board will have the file type for artworks stuck on the end because it does not have any other file type information. So it will have comma D94 added to the file name. However, a JPEG, because it knows what a JPEG is, if it ends /JPG, it will not append comma, whatever the file type for JPEG is. I should know that, C85. It will not put comma C85 on the end because it knows what a JPEG is. Virtual Acorn knows about this because it is in Tools Options. Hopefully you can see that. If we go to HostFS extensions, quick question, can you see this window or not?
Yes, although it's pretty small.
Okay, apologies that it's pretty small. It's basically got a list of RISC OS hexadecimal file types down the left-hand side and the file extensions in the middle. And basically, one of these will be C85, which is JPEG, C85, and JPG, JFIF, and JPEG file extensions under DOS or under, on the host filing system will automatically be recognized as JPEGs. This is quite useful if we're going to have things clicked backwards and forwards, because Windows applications often are going to get confused by having comma FFF or whatever stuck on the end of a file name. So the more mappings that we can create so that RISC OS and Windows can understand files that have file extensions as their native format, the easier our life is going to be. So for example, in this setup, if we look for AE6, I have file type AE6 set for both doc and docx so that Word documents are understood to have a file type. Now, AE6 is not the file type for docx. There is a proper file type for .docx, which I can probably be using. But here the important thing was to have it understood, because by telling it about this file type, and in a sense you could make up a hex file type if you were just adding PC file types that you used, although I'd probably get my wrist slapped by somebody for saying that. The purpose here is to make sure that it has a file type so that that file type is not having get comma XXX stuck on the end of it automatically by HostFS. And that means that when we double click on said files under HostFS and then we launch it via Uniprint, the underlying file on the disk is called Word document.docx, not Word document.docx, comma A86 or something like that. That means that Word will then understand that because it's set to map docx files into Word, and that means that when we click on an AE6 file, it will load it into Microsoft Word. And since the host, in this particular case, since the host application for loading .docx and .doc files is both Microsoft Word, then having a single file type for that is not a problem. And whenever we click on an AE6 file, then that will load into Microsoft Word or LibreOffice for that matter. I tend to use LibreOffice on the host platform. So we might well want to set up mappings here. I did notice that .doc is not in the standard Virtual Acorn mapping set, so you may well want to put an AE6 file type in here. And as I say, the more of these that you can add, the better. If you can find out the RISC OS file types, there is a list on the rules source things of all the file types. I think all publicly accessible file types are listed somewhere on the rule thing. I did go there to find something out a couple of months back. So there are lists of file types and extensions that you can access. And then create mappings between the applications and things that you use. I would strongly recommend things like PNGs, PNGs, PDF files, ADF, which will probably already be there. But adding other ones too. I have extended it in the versions we supply with machines, but there will always be more, similarly on some types of images. This means that makes it very much easier to transfer things backwards and forwards without the comma XXX appearing on the file extension when you're transferring backwards and forwards. Within the operating system and network environments, we also make use. I will, because we were in that window. I will just go over one more thing, and that was creating a share for our transferring files. In the HostFS tab rather than HostFS extensions, if we click Show DOS Extensions and select a path, we would select our file swap that we created. This is a different machine, so it doesn't have it on. I'll just do the temp folder, for example. We give it a mount name like file swap, and then we click Add, and then that will appear on the icon bar on future boots on the RISC OS desktop. And that way, the folder same folder that we're using for network file transfers to our side or to our machine can also be brought up in a virtual Acorn or a HostFS on RPC-MU system, so that we can have one folder that's being used for data transfer in and out of all the filing systems, and you'll have an icon on your RISC OS icon bar to access it, which can again be really helpful and speed things along. Back to the file extensions and file types, we have a MIME map file, which is a file that typically lives in boot. There are, I think, at least 3 possible locations. It might be in boot choices internet. It might be in boot resources internet files, or on a just, I think it's in boot choices users single internet, something like that. So can be worth just using a find and doing find mine. Also in Flash, but please ignore that one. And here it's in internet files. So there it's there. This is one from my own downstairs work machine. It's a lot nicer if we load this into StrongEd. So you remembered that I had it open earlier. Now, this is pretty headache inducing, so I understand if you completely bail at this point, but this is how programs like Messenger and things translate incoming file types on things that you receive via email into file types, file extensions. So it is worth trying to get to grips with it if you can. Because that means that if people send you files that you can't handle automatically, perhaps you're using RISC OS 4 and you haven't got a .docx thing defined, and you receive an email from somebody with a .docx file format and you wanted to have the right file type, this is how you do it. Now, when you open an email and you look at the actual content of the email, you'll see that the attachments have a MIME type. There are lists of these online. If you just look up MIME type and do a Google search for MIME types, you will find that a lot of these are standardized and you can find lists of these. So if you are sort of unsure, you can get lists. But if we look in here, I think I've set up in this one, assuming it's a docx, but of course I haven't. I know that on some of my the machines that I build for customers, particularly the sort of modern RISC OS 5 machines, I've added in a lot of additional file types and things, and thought this machine did as well, but it's making me look a fool. Here we can see application MS Word has a MIME type of MS Word, application stroke MS Word, a RISC OS name of MS Word. I don't believe that that's particularly important. I think it's just sort of an identification purpose. What is important is the file type. So this tells us that anything that's identified application stroke MS Word is a file type AE6. And the next thing, which has been moved on to the next line for some reason, is the DOS, important thing, which is the DOS extension, in this case .doc. Further along, we have some of the first contents of a file, and that means that if it can peek inside a file and actually see some of the contents, then you will see extra bits and pieces that may relate to detecting a file that applications could use to try and translate between platforms. In practice, I'm not sure that much, if anything, does anything with that, but I may be wrong. The list of file types is tab separated. So the list of DOS extensions is tab separated. So we can see that here for MPEG, we have several. Just bear with me 1 second. I will just check on one of my modern machines and see what the MIME type is for a .docx, and we can add one in real time. So the network. And 42, for example. This is net files, MIME map. Okay, I'm going to copy and paste this through. Forgive me, I did that on Windows because I didn't really want you to sort of see the contents of my NAS because it has customer details and things on it. So if we go into Uniprint and go to Uniclip, we should find that. So this appears to be the rather long-winded MIME type for a .x file. So what we would do here is there are positions in the file that are recommended for certain things, but for the sake of just demonstration purposes, I will just put it in after the line for a Microsoft Word file. I will put in a tab and we'll call this MS Word X. The actual RISC OS file type for this would be A7E apparently. That's presumably defined in TechWriter, and we will put .docx as a file extension. And this would then set up a mapping between docx and the appropriate file, appropriate MIME map, and then we would save that to disk. I think you might need to do a reboot for that to take effect. I'm not sure. Or possibly rmre init MIME map. There may be a neater way of doing it. I'm not sure. It's not something I do all that often. This is one of those set it up once and then forget about it. But we now have a MIME map set up for a .docx file, and from now on, whenever we receive an email with a .docx file in it, it will be given file type A7E. Now, I would probably at this point want to set up a mapping between docx and A7E in Virtual Acorns file extensions if we're going to use A7E for this, which we probably ought to because that's what TechWriter has defined. But I explained why I was not doing so earlier because I didn't need to. But using this technique, we can map additional file formats through based on MIME type, RISC OS file type, and RISC OS extension, and document extension. I believe it is possible to add things that don't have MIME types. You can see here about entries with no valid MIME types mapped, where we could just put in tab, and then put in the put in a name, a file type, and a file extension. If we just wanted to expand this, that would be helpful for other applications that use the MIME map to do translations between file names and file extensions. And again, the more you have of this set up on your machine, the more automatic translations between file names, file types, DOS extensions become, and that can stop a lot of head scratching. I appreciate I'm not giving the best demonstration of this as can be, but I am starting to feel tired and feel like I probably ought to be bringing the talk to a close. I think this is one of those things that I am more than happy to help people with any of this. If you talk to me, I can even set up some of these things for you on your own machines over the phone. Obviously, I would charge for time for doing things like that for understandable reasons. But the point is that you can do all of this, and even if you don't want to tackle it yourself and you want to have me do it for you, then don't be afraid to do that, because it can make life so much easier if we can just bring files to and fro, drag and drop files onto Uniprint, or copy and paste information through, drag files into common shared folders that you can then just access through the icon bar, transfer files to from network drives, to from networked PCs. It makes the world feel so much smaller, and you can then use each tool as a tool for the job. And one of the things I was going to show, as silly as it was, I'm going to drop out of Virtual Acorn for a second now, and just do something completely wacky. If we just share the Pinebook Pro again, share screen, and where's the Pinebook Pro? There's the Pinebook Pro. So if we open our connection to the Sidekick, and then we go Uni Launch, and we go to this is utterly ridiculous because I'm going through multiple layers of VNC, etc. Why is that not? Necessary, but not. I suspect this will be another disaster, but we can be a bit silly for the last thing. If we go to movies and TV, bring up Mario. It's probably being killed by all the different layers of things. But what we have here is a PC accessing a Pinebook Pro via VNC, connecting. I should have said the Sidekick, incidentally, has been running entirely via Wi-Fi today, not via a wired Ethernet link. It would have been even faster via a wired Ethernet link. Watching a YouTube video via another layer of VNC back to the PC, all going out over the Zoom connection. Slightly bonkers. But you can go away today saying you did get to watch YouTube videos on a RISC OS machine in a web browser in a rather bonkers way. It's rather more usable in without all the layers of daftness that I'm incorporating in here. One final piece of little tips is if you are doing heavy VNC usage, the new TCP/IP stack from ROD is about 10 times faster than the old TCP/IP stack for doing VNC stuff. It does depend a bit on the machine and what you're using, but it is a big difference, particularly on sort of faster machines like Pis and things. I saw a massive uptick in sustained throughput of the VNC session with the new TCP/IP stack installed. It was sort of, I say literally 10 times the throughput when doing heavy VNC tasks, and that really did make quite a real world difference to how practically usable it all was. So yeah, okay, so I'm going to close that out and stop screen sharing the Pinebook Pro and stop, I think, because I've bored you all to death. But hopefully that has given a small amount of insight into techniques and things for working with Windows PCs and RISC OS machines together, be it virtual Acorn or be it native machines, something of a practicality. And as I say, if you'll forgive the plug, the systems that we sell offer a lot of this pre-ready and set up to go. If you buy a sort of a network-enabled machine like a Sidekick, you'll find that we've set up shared folders and Uniprint and everything else for you. And we tailor it, and we'll often tailor things to your network for you. If you get something like a Forte or a Pinebook Pro, you'll find a lot of the software and programs that we've seen tonight preloaded, ready to go. Similarly, on some of the more elaborate machines like the Hydra, a lot of this is set up within the same machine, ready to go. So a lot of these techniques pre-built into our machines, but there's no reason you can't do any of this yourself without an Archon machine using the techniques that I've been showing tonight. And as I say, by all means, refer back to the video that the Wakefield user group put online, so that you can sort of just jump into the little bits and sort of pause it on things if you want to see what I was doing. And with that, I will stop. If anybody has any questions, now would be the time to poke me.
Yes, please. Hi,
Yeah.
Andrew. Thanks for that. Really interesting. So I'll be sat on my city with my Windows 10 laptop.
Right.
And viewing via VNC my Raspberry Pi running RISC OS.
Okay.
Up in the attic. But is there any way of getting sound from the Pi or from the RISC OS?
That's a good
I
point.
think VNC doesn't.
VNC doesn't. There is a program called, and it doesn't really help you in your example. There is a program called, see, Andrew, the brain. I'm tired. I'm still not fully recovered from when I was ill the weekend.
Okay.
So brain's not working. There is another program that goes from RISC OS to a Windows machine that will attempt audio. RDP client.
RTP.
RDP, Romeo Delta. It stands for Remote Desktop Protocol Client. Will go from a RISC OS machine to Windows, and I believe will attempt audio.
Okay.
With VNC, not so much. I'm not sure if the VNC. Part of me thinks that Windows VNC clients might well be able to do that, but I'm not 100% sure, so I don't want to make a promise on it.
Mm-hmm.
To a laptop, to a Raspberry Pi in the attic, you're probably out of luck. If it's in the same vicinity, then you can pipe the audio out into a hi-fi or what have you, so that when you VNC into it, it would come out of your hi-fi. And that's sort of, I tend to be doing a lot of this in the same. If I'm doing that kind of thing, it'll be two machines in the same room. And so you probably possibly heard that when the Mario thing started up, the sound that the Sidekick is connected to a monitor, and the monitor, the sound for the Mario video started playing through the monitor speakers.
I would imagine the lip sync might be a bit out.
Fractionally, but honestly, unless you're looking for it, you probably wouldn't notice with the rest of the life.
I would.
With VNC, it's usually close enough to not be a problem. But you do make a good point. Otherwise, if it's a long distance, that is always a problem. As I say, RDP client going from RISC OS to a Windows machine will attempt the audio back over the connection. and is a reason to use RDP client. I didn't cover RDP client because I believe there may be some issues with that on the latest hardware. I'm not 100% certain. I think at least one module used by RDP client might be a
I'll
problem.
have a play.
But I know it's broadly compatible with modern machines, I think, but there might be some little caveat needed. And secondly, it does require you to enable RDP connections to the PC, which typically means that you have to use the pro versions of Windows and enable remote desktop stuff in the settings, which I felt was a little bit more than I wanted to be showing tonight.
Yeah.
We can do it. It's really just a case of right-clicking the computer on the desktop and going properties and then advanced system properties and then sharing and then typing in a username and a password and what have you. But it didn't feel, whereas the VNC shows you literally what is happening on the PC, RDP creates an additional session on the PC in the background. So you're not actually remotely controlling the PC, you're just sort of remoting in a sort of hidden way into the PC to have a background session. And there are pros and cons to that depending on what you need.
Right.
But it's a different way to skin a cat, I agree. It may help with the audio. But I don't have a magic silver bullet for VNC audio off the top of my head.
Shall have a play.
So sorry about that.
I'll have a play. I'll let you know.
Yeah. So where you have your Raspberry Pi tucked into behind your hi-fi system in the lounge, and then have them both connected to the receiver, so you can be watching the TV and then just switch your input on your.
Well, I've got a different Raspberry Pi acting as a server, but that's glued to the underside of a shelf up in my office, and my receiver down here connects to it via Wi-Fi, and yeah. Very complicated house, my house.
Yeah, there may well be solutions if I'm thinking a little bit more clearly, but forgive me, that's the down, as I say. I'm more or less all healthy again, but it was a pretty rough 5 days.
Oh dear. All right.
Or, no, not 5 days. I can see that
Andrew,
David.
how is Wi-Fi coming along?
In what set? Sorry.
How is Wi-Fi coming along on RISC OS?
Oh, okay. So we're not. This isn't related to what I've just been talking about. You're talking about general Wi-Fi development on RISC OS 5.
Yeah.
Okay. Sorry. Time to put on a different hat.
Yep.
So it's coming along. I did talk a bit about it at the mug thing on Saturday. Basically, we're, as you probably know, we're using a USB connected device as a test bed, simply because the USB stack is a known piece of technology. Where I was trying to sort of use an SDIO connected one, although we have the SDIO stuff working now. It's best to tackle one thing rather than two things. If you're trying to got to move, you only want one moving part rather than multiple moving parts. Otherwise, you make it a complete nightmare. So we're using a USB one for testing purposes. We can download the firmware to it, bring it up. We can identify it with the stack. Stack understands that it's a Wi-Fi device. It appears in the Wi-Fi sections of the of IF config, etc. We can tell it to initiate a connection. It will go through its internal setup. It will run for about a minute or so. But we haven't got to a point where it's actually scanning networks and stuff like that. So it is progressing. It's not helped by the fact that limited programmer resources is the honest thing. That the same person who does that works on Pinebook and ROCCP. We do have a second programmer on the networking stuff generally, but he's doing other aspects like the network manager that we need for the Wi-Fi system, which I demonstrated on Saturday. So that's developing in parallel, the network manager tools. I won't reiterate what I said at the mug meeting, but if you I'm sure you were either there or can watch the video on demand for the mug meeting to catch up on that. So that's developing with a second programmer. But as I say, programmer time is a limited factor. So when John's working on the Wi-Fi, he's not working on other things for Pinebook or what have you. and when he is, then he's not working on the Wi-Fi. So it's balancing, number of people who are capable of doing the work versus everything else. It's coming along nicely in the sense that we've got lots of sort of hooks put into the stack so that the Ethernet, the Wi-Fi drivers don't have to reinvent the wheel all the time. They can take advantage of the functionality that's built into the stack. And it's coming along, but it's not there yet. And I mean, at the current rate of knots, I'm sort of hoping that it'll happen this year, but I don't want to make a promise on that, because at the end of the day, it depends exactly where time is being spent at any given moment, and it's a difficult balance of trying to accommodate all the different projects that need to be worked on.
Understood. Thanks very much.
And particularly from a selfish perspective, stuff like that for Rod is stuff that is sort of done, in my sense, as a sort of charity act, not quite, but versus RComp stuff that has to pay my bills and pay my electric and put food on the table. So there is a financial side as well, where I still need to be able to eat to be able to keep things going. And sadly it is kind of down to that, given inflation and everything else, is that income does not necessarily make it outgoing anymore. So right. Okay, I know David had his hand up earlier. David, you want to unmute yourself?
Yeah, just a quick question. I don't know, it's a RISC PC EMU question. Is that something you would know about or not really?
Well, you could ask it and I can always say not.
Yeah. Okay, but basically, is there any way, like I've seen on the Cloverleaf site, but is there any way I can, like with the RISC PC EMU, I can make it so it automatically goes to full screen when you load it? Because they say in Cloverleaf, they say they've incorporated it into the source code, but if I manually download it and put it on a machine, because I use Linux a lot, I want to be able to kind of do that myself rather than being reliant on other people to do it for me, kind of thing. Is that something that can be done, or?
Well, as I say, I know that the Cloverleaf guys have done stuff. I'm not quite sure on the availability of it, and it's one of the reasons I have tended to not use, as you heard in my talk, I use Virtual Acorn rather than RPCM. Yeah. I tend to find that the problem is, being blunt, with an emulator, I want to run 26-bit and 32-bit applications. RISC OS 5 is not the best fit for that. I want, because RISC OS 5 will not run 26-bit applications on an emulator. And if you're emulating a RISC PC, the main reason to emulate a RISC PC is to have a broad wealth of software. So I want to run an emulator that can run a decent 26-bit operating system that can also run 32-bit software and 26-bit software with it together. For me, that is Virtual Acorn. Going the RPCMU route would mean probably going RISC OS 5 or RISC OS 3.7. I think there are ways and means of putting in the other operating systems. It's not as clear cut as just downloading a version. I did earlier that Peter Howkins was on, but I'm not seeing his name here anymore.
Yeah, no, that's what I was hoping it was going to still be around.
It would have been better to tackle that, shoot that at Peter, to be perfectly honest with you, because
I was hoping it was still going to be there.
Baby, and he determines what code is used. I believe a version is downloadable from Cloverleaf with some of the extra functionality built in, but it may not be available for all platforms, so you may not be able to get a Linux version for it. So in which case you would probably want to direct that to Stefan at Cloverleaf.
Okay, that that's cool. Thanks for your help. I appreciate that. Thank you.
Yeah, sorry, I can't be any more help on that.
Just so you know as well.
The reasons the scroll wheel and the full screen are two of the main reasons I use the 439 version of Virtual Acorn. You can. Is that if you do go Virtual Acorn route and you go the virtual RPC or just SA, don't use the SA core. It's pretty pointless. You want the ARM 7500 core, which is the middle one in the list. And not only does it provide twice as much video memory, you get 16 meg rather than 8 meg of video memory. It also gives a working scroll wheel as well. So I find that to be the best core to use.
Yeah, just to let you know, sorry, I'm interrupting you, Honor. Just to let you know as well, obviously you know, but you can actually run 439 in RISC PCEMU, because that's what I use.
Okay, yeah, you can. It's just a little bit fiddlier because there isn't a pre-packaged.
Yeah. Cool. Thanks for your help. Thanks for the talk as well. It's really it's been really helpful as well, because especially when you were talking about the uni stuff, the fact that you can use it on Wine on Linux, because I'm using Linux a lot more. I didn't know you could. It's good to know that I could use uni stuff.
I was demonstrating it. The other thing I didn't mention, but Uniprint does work with RPCMU as well. You simply have to tell it where you've installed it. In the if you click on it down by the clock in Windows, you can choose where it picks its jobs up from. Basically, you have to tell it the same folder as Virtual Acorn, but in wherever you've installed RPCMU to, you need to follow the same essentially the same path, but through RPCMU. So it's basically looking in the scrap.
No, sorry, I was thinking more of the other tools you can use, because you can use like the other tools as well.
Yeah, but I'm just explaining that if you are an RPCMU user, the Uniprint mechanisms can be used with RPCMU just as well as Virtual Acorn. Uniprint has native support for Virtual Acorn because of when it was developed. If we do a Uniprint 5, then obviously a little bit better support for RPCMU would be nice. But as far as I'm aware, is that RPCMU can install to almost anywhere, or you just sort of drag and drop it somewhere. In which case, it's difficult for Uniprint to know where you will have installed it or RPCMU to. So detecting it could be a bit of a challenge. So it may not be added in version 5, depending on whether we can actually detect it in a sensible manner.
Can I just pick up on David's question about full screen mode with Linux, RPCMU?
Yep.
I'm not sure whether I've fully understood it, but I find that if you get to the before you get to the desktop, if you bring down the menu and click on full screen mode, then the Linux version will go to full screen properly. Before I discovered that, or was told about it on the RPCMU list, what I used to do was hold down, just tell it to, when I got to the desktop, tell it to go to full screen mode, but it wasn't positioned correctly. So if you just hold Alt down and click on the screen, you can drag it into what looks like a proper full screen position. And then you can run RPCMU on Linux in full screen. It's a bit fiddly, but it's doable.
Thanks for that, John. That's really helpful.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, thanks for that. I appreciate that.
Yeah.
Would that windowed screen resolution is too big for the actual screen? Because obviously when it's windowed, if you've got to run in a higher resolution, you can still use the Alt and drag it, you're saying?
Yeah, well, I've got a laptop, which Andrew sold to me about 2 millennia ago. Right. It's a nice 17-inch Samsung, and it runs at 1600 by 900. And it was that machine that I had the problem with. If I run it on my Linux box, which is connected to the nice widescreen Acer monitor, again, that Andrew sold to me, then it's fine, because it boots up into a window, and you can then get it to go to full screen, so long as.
So what? Sorry, just so I know. So you press Alt and then you just drag the window and it makes it full screen.
Yeah, you can do that with any window in Linux. If you hold the Alt.
I didn't know that.
Yeah.
Oh, fantastic.
Well, there was a time when I didn't know it either. So
you say that. Thank you. Thank you.
Okay. Anybody else with a question or query or idea?
Have you got any updates, Andrew, on the 3 machines that you showed at the so-called Wakefield show?
Well, I mean, I've sold all of them in the sense that machines of each of those types.
Yeah, well, you were saying that they're still in development.
They are. I mean, these are live living products. The Fortissimo, the triangular machine, is done and dusted. That's I've sold out, bought additional stock, sold that, and so on and so forth. So that's been coming in and going out in free flowing. I've got one more to do of those in the job queue. I've had a few of the ROCC raids go out. That is more experimental still because the RK3399 port isn't 100% finished. That was a little bit more work in progress. But obviously it's a little bit more exciting exciting. They're all exciting in their own way. But with features like the built sort of the high speed eMMC storage and the RAID capability, that's obviously appealing to people. So I've had a few of those go out on the understanding that it's a work in progress system, and a couple of Hydras too. Again, those are somewhat work in progress, but the actual functionality that I've demonstrated at Wakefield is all 100% there. So it's just a product that will grow and enhance. I've supplied somebody with a motherboard for development work on NVMe, for example. We'll see where we get with that for adding further native NVMe support to RISC OS. They're all shipping live products and with stock going in and out as people buy them. But there is an understanding on the sort of with the ROCC RAID and the Hydra that these are products that will improve and expand over time because there's future expansion capability built into them. That's not to say there isn't future expansion with the triangular Fortissimo. I mean, I can't wait for RUL's USB 3 project to come to fruition, for example, because that will give further performance gains on Fortissimo and Forti2, for example. But those are living live products that and the polished products to my satisfaction. So Fortissimo, as I say, that's working beautifully, and people are using them and enjoying them, and complete with the OLED screens with the you can put your own output through the OLED display. Debug information for programmers and things can be output to a second screen, and so on and so forth. There's a bunch of cool stuff up to 4 SSDs of varying operating systems. All working beautifully. So the systems are all good and selling and what have you. But yeah, as I say, most of my time recently has simply just been fulfilling jobs and getting stuff out. So yeah, Chris has got his hand.
Gavin's had his a hand raised there for about a decade or so, I think.
Oh, sorry, Gavin.
Hi, Andrew. Thank you for the talk. Just a quick question.
Sorry, yeah, I've been waiting for people to put their actual hands up, and you've got
I got
a Zoom hand up. Okay.
Some of us are more techie than others. That's
sorry, this is me just being not used to the etiquette of Zoom.
Quick question. I thought I saw in your presentation Uniprint 411.
Yeah.
Is that correct? Because it's only got 410A still on Plingstone.
Yeah, basically there's an unreleased one which possibly needs a wee bit more testing. In all honesty, it might have been responsible for the board shenanigans that didn't quite fun. But I'm not necessarily sure it was guilty, because I did have it running when I was doing my earlier tests just to make sure. So, and when it was working quite happily earlier. So not 100% sure. But there is a 411 designed to deal with some problems that the very latest nightly builds of RISC OS 5 have caused due to changes in how certain file operations at very low level in RISC OS work that affects third-party filing systems that were built when. What's changed is not bad changes, but if filing systems worked a certain way because they assumed that the behavior was what happened in the Acorn era, it could have a knock-on effect. The new changes can have a knock-on effect. So we fixed those issues. But what I would like to do is, the reason it's not gone out is I would like to see a few more changes made and do a proper upgrade, because what I don't really want to do is issue 4.11 sort of almost 10 years after Uniprint 4 shipped and have to deal with tech support for people upgrading. If I'm going to have tech support burden, I would rather put out a proper upgrade and have it be a low-cost chargeable upgrade so that I can actually cover the costs of actually supporting the upgrade that I put out. So we're just trying to see if there's anything else that we can do at the same time, possibly do a 4.2 or something with a little bit more stuff in. And that's why it hasn't actually made it onto Ping Store. But if it gets to a point where 4.30 is shipping and I haven't made the changes, then it'll go out as a freebie, just so that people don't get into a mess when they upgrade to 4.30. But that's what that was all about.
Okay. Thank you.
And I just add a comment for David. I think I might have partially misunderstood what he was asking. When I referred to my laptop, the problem was that I was setting the screen resolution within RPCMU to the actual resolution of the screen, and that was causing the problem. My Linux box, when I run that on the large screen monitor, there's no problem, because the resolution of RPCMU that I'm using there is 1920 by 1080, which fits well within the bounds of the monitor itself.
Oh yeah, no. My question was, when you first start RISC PC EMU, it always starts in a windowed environment.
Yeah.
And I just wish it would start full screen, because you'd have to go to menu full screen. And I, on the Clover site, I've seen that they've incorporated it into their version, but I just wanted to try and do it. I didn't know if it's possible to do it myself, so that when I download it from other places or use it on other machines, I could do it myself rather than having to use Cloverleaf's version, because I don't know what Cloverleaf, I don't know much about Cloverleaf, and I don't know what else they might have done.
Because really, I appreciate you guys taking the time to explore that, but we are still in the Q&A session, and this really doesn't have anything to do with the talk that I was giving.
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
Andrew.
Sorry.
Can I answer? Chris Hall's had his hand up for quite a while.
Yes. The ROCC Pi Model C.
Yep.
Is that a possible RISC OS port candidate, or is it a 64-bit and impossible to use machine?
So there are various C editions. The products that we're doing are based on the ROCC Pi 4. There is a ROCC Pi 5 coming online, which is not really a valid target for RISC OS. It's 64-bit cores. The performance cores on the ROCC Pi 5 are 64-bit only. I think you could run it on the non-performance cores, but then it would be like running on, I think they're A55 cores, so not particularly performant. It
was the Model 4C.
The 4C is fine, and that's what we use. I think in the we use the 4C Plus, I believe, in the Rocky Raid. It's got the same.
Thank you. That was a piece of information I couldn't find anywhere.
So I think we use the C Plus edition, but basically any of the ROCC Pi 4 range are supported by the port. And the C Plus has the advantage of having a similar form factor to a Raspberry Pi. So that opens up options, more options for casing board without having to do custom metalwork and what have you. And there's some really nice cases available and interesting options available within the Raspberry Pi form factor. So that's one of the reasons for going that route. There are models that have a slightly different form factor, which there are pros and cons to each one, but that's that's what's supported.
Thank you.
So any of basically the port should work with any of the ROCC 4 variants, but not the 5. And the 3 was very slow, so you probably want to ignore the 3.
Thank you. That's excellent.
Any other questions from anybody? Okay, well, in that case, Chris, Rick, etc. I guess then that's it for the end of the talk.
Thanks, Andrew.
No problem.
Thank you.
Appreciate that.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Andrew.
Oh. So how's everyone doing otherwise?
Yeah, really good. How are you?
Well, having had 4 days of not being very well, it's nice to be feeling a bit better.
Oh no, sorry to hear that.
Yeah.
Is it hopefully the Southwest show will be going ahead next year again? Come down to see you guys.
I spoke to the woman after the last show and sort of agreed things with her, but I must admit I haven't actually been back, so I'm feeling a little bit guilty. I probably ought to give her a call and just formally confirm that we want to do next February.
Cool. Okay, I'm going to go now then and see you in February. Thanks, Nathan.
The agreement that we sort of internally we have is that providing we can get the same price that we paid last year, we'll go ahead next year. And the woman did.
Oh, fantastic!
The woman did say that was going to be possible, but of course, now that 3 months have gone by, she may have changed her tune. So we will see. Yeah. But all being well,
cool. All right. Yeah.
Southwest Show 2024 will be
cool. Okay, I'll go now then and see you in February.
Okay, take care. Good to see you, David.
Thanks again. Yep. Cheers. Thanks. Cheers. Bye.
Anybody else?
Speaking of shows, Brian, did you manage to get any further with finding or sorting out that hotel that you were looking at?
No, Peter's fired off some emails to some other people.
Oh, right, so that's different ones again then?
Yes.
Right, okay.
Cheaper ones. So, yeah, don't know yet still.
Of course, the longer it takes you to actually find somewhere, the less likely it is that the date you've set aside on the website will be the one you use.
Yeah, will actually exist, but never mind.
I'm so tempted to say that at this point, we're almost too close for this year, and it'd be better to sort of plan something for next year and do a proper, do a more elaborate job next year rather than trying to rush something through this year at relatively short notice. What I'm thinking is changing a venue and the combination of a change of venue and short notice could be less than ideal in terms of.
Yeah, it makes the logistics a little bit more complicated. Complex
logistics. It may well mean that overnight stays become more expensive, and of course, people getting the word out to people to get them to come. Will there be an archive in the right, at the right time to announce it and what have you? It's a question mark. I'm not trying to be difficult, but it's we're now down to effective.
The London show got done in about 6 weeks, so
yeah. I'm not saying you can't do a show in 6 weeks. I'm saying, can you do a show and do it to your usual high standard in terms of getting the people through the door and getting the message out that it's changed the venue and everything else? That was
plan 18 months in advance just gets even harder in some ways.
Well, touche.
Yeah. We will see. Well,
compromise, plan 12 months ahead.
Yeah. Well, that was sort of the plan at the start of the year, but then I didn't. So
Well, that's sort of what you've done every year since you started, isn't it? Because you kind of start the planning as soon as you completed the previous show.
Yeah, for some definition of planning, we kind of. I just book the venue and then forget about it for 9 months, and then. Oh, Richard is waving. Oh, he's bye. Goodbye. He was waving. I'm just trying to look at what Cloverleaf have added to RPCMU.
I believe it's scroll wheel, clipboard, and full screen at startup with it.
I'm trying to see if this copy of the code I've got here is March last year. I might need to fetch it again.
I believe it was all submitted back to Peter, but
yeah,
Peter doesn't always incorporate everything if he doesn't agree with it, which is his right.
Yeah.